The dust cloud rose behind the stagecoach as it rattled into Mojave, California on a scorching afternoon in May of 1882. And Olivia Lambert pressed her face against the window. Her stomach knotted with equal parts hope and desperation, because the $30 sewn into her hem was all that separated her from complete destitution. She stepped down from the coach onto the sun-baked Main Street, her dark blue traveling dress already clinging to her skin despite the dry heat. At 23 years old, she had left San Francisco with nothing but a carpetbag, a letter of reference from her previous employer, and the determination that had kept her going since her father's death 6 months prior. The gambling debts he had left behind had consumed everything, including the small boarding house that had been her childhood home. Mojave was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of weathered wooden buildings scattered along the railroad line that cut through the Mojave Desert like a promise of civilization. She could see the saloon, the general store, a land office, and what appeared to be a hotel with a dining room attached. Beyond the town, the landscape stretched out in shades of brown and gold, dotted with Joshua trees and sagebrush, mountains rising in the distance like purple shadows. Olivia picked up her bag and walked toward the general store, her boots leaving prints in the dusty street. A man in a wide-brimmed hat tipped it to her as he passed, his eyes curious but not unkind. She nodded back, keeping her chin up despite the uncertainty churning in her chest. The store was dimly lit and smelled of leather, tobacco, and coffee. A woman behind the counter looked up from her ledger, her weathered face breaking into a welcoming smile. "Help you, miss?" "I hope so," Olivia said, setting down her bag. "I am looking for work. I can cook, clean, keep accounts, teach children. I have a letter of reference." She pulled the carefully folded paper from her reticule and offered it across the counter. The woman, who introduced herself as Martha Hayes, read the letter with raised eyebrows. "Says here you managed a boarding house in San Francisco. 12 rooms, full kitchen operation. That is impressive." "It was my father's establishment," Olivia explained. "I ran it after my mother passed for nearly 5 years. Martha folded the letter and handed it back. "Well, we do not have much call for that sort of thing here in Mojave. Most folks do their own cooking and cleaning, but you might want to talk to Garrett Morrison." "Who is he?" "Rancher. Has a spread about 8 miles west of here near the foothills. Big operation, runs cattle, has some horses too. His wife died in childbirth 2 years back along with the baby." Martha's expression softened with sympathy. "He has been managing on his own with just his ranch hands, but I know he has been struggling. House is a mess, I would wager, and the man barely feeds himself proper meals. He was in here last month looking half-starved." Olivia felt a flutter of something that might have been hope. "Do you think he would hire me?" "Cannot say for certain, but it is worth asking. He is a good man, fair and honest, keeps to himself mostly, but he treats his people right." Martha paused, studying Olivia with shrewd eyes. "You looking for permanent work or just something temporary?" "I was hoping for something through the summer at least," Olivia admitted. "I plan to continue west to Sacramento in the fall. I have an aunt there who might be able to help me find a teaching position." Martha nodded. "Well, Morrison might appreciate knowing it is temporary. Makes things simpler, if you understand my meaning. A young woman like you, living out on a ranch with a widower, people might talk if they thought it was permanent." Olivia felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she understood the practical wisdom in Martha's words. "How would I reach his ranch?" "You can rent a horse from the livery, but that would cost you. Or you could wait until tomorrow morning. Morrison usually comes into town on Saturdays for supplies. You could catch him then." Martha glanced at the window, where the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. You will need a place to stay tonight regardless. The hotel is clean enough, though not fancy. Mrs. Chen runs it, and she serves a decent supper. Olivia calculated quickly in her head. A night at the hotel would cost her at least 50 cents, maybe more with a meal, but she had little choice. Thank you for your help, Mrs. Hayes. Call me Martha. And good luck to you, miss. I hope Morrison has sense enough to hire you. Lord knows he needs the help. The hotel was indeed clean, though spare. Olivia paid 75 cents for a small room with a narrow bed and a washstand, which included supper in the dining room. She changed out of her traveling dress, sponged herself clean with water from the pitcher, and put on her other good dress, a gray cotton with white trim at the collar and cuffs. It was plain but respectable, and she wanted to make a good impression. The dining room held only 3 other guests, all men who looked like railroad workers or prospectors. Mrs. Chen, a small Chinese woman with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, served a simple meal of beef stew, bread, and canned peaches. It was the first hot food Olivia had eaten in 2 days, and she had to force herself not to gulp it down too quickly. That night, she lay in the unfamiliar bed listening to the sounds of the desert night through the open window. Coyotes howled in the distance, and somewhere a piano played in what must have been the saloon. She thought about her father, about the boarding house, about all the things she had lost. But she also thought about tomorrow, about the possibility of work and a place to stay, at least for a few months. It was more than she had when she woke up this morning in that cramped stagecoach. She woke at dawn, dressed carefully, and went down to the dining room for the breakfast that was included in her rate. Mrs. Chen served coffee, fried eggs, and biscuits that were better than Olivia had expected. She ate slowly, watching through the window for any sign of a rancher coming into town. Around 8 o'clock, Martha Hayes came into the hotel dining room and spotted Olivia right away. Morrison just tied up his wagon at the general store. If you want to talk to him, now is your chance. Olivia's heart jumped. She stood quickly, smoothed her skirts, and followed Martha back to the store. Her mouth felt dry, and she pressed her hand against her stomach to calm the butterflies. A tall man stood at the counter, his back to them, wearing dusty work clothes, a worn leather vest, and a hat that had seen better days. He was giving Martha's husband a list, his voice low and rough with what sounded like exhaustion. "And I need nails, the 3-inch ones, about 5 pounds. Also coffee, flour, beans, salt pork if you have it." "Garrett," Martha said, and the man turned. Olivia's first impression was of intense weariness. He was perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of beard shadowing his jaw. But his eyes were striking, a clear gray-green that caught the light from the window, and despite the tiredness etched into his features, she could see the strong bones of a handsome face. "This is Miss Lambert," Martha continued. "She arrived yesterday from San Francisco, and she is looking for work. I thought she might be able to help you out at the ranch." Garrett Morrison looked at Olivia with those tired eyes, and she saw surprise flicker across his face, followed by something that might have been wariness. "What kind of work?" Olivia stepped forward, trying to project confidence she did not entirely feel. "I can cook, clean, manage a household. I ran my father's boarding house in San Francisco for 5 years. I have experience with accounts, inventory, planning meals for groups. I am a hard worker, Mr. Morrison, and I am not afraid of long days." He studied her for a long moment, and she could almost see him thinking through the complications. Finally, he said, "How long are you looking to stay? Through the summer, until early fall?" "I plan to continue to Sacramento then." Something in his expression shifted, as though this answer satisfied some concern he had not voiced. "The ranch is remote. 8 miles from town and the house is in rough shape. I have not kept it up like I should have. The work would be hard. I am not afraid of hard work. I have 6 ranch hands. You would be cooking for all of us 3 meals a day, cleaning, laundry, mending. It is a lot for one person. I managed 12 boarders on my own, Olivia said steadily. I can handle it. Garrett looked at Martha, who nodded encouragingly, then back at Olivia. I can pay you $20 a month plus room and board. You would have your own room in the main house. I stay in a separate building. Used to be the foreman's quarters before I moved the foreman into the bunkhouse with the other hands. So you would have privacy. $20 a month was less than she had hoped for, but with room and board included, she could save most of it. 4 months of work would give her $80, enough to start fresh in Sacramento with something to spare. That seems fair, she said. When can you start? Today, if you need me. For the first time, she saw the hint of a smile touch his tired face. I need you. Let me finish up here and we can head out. Do you have much in the way of belongings? Just a carpet bag at the hotel. We will get it. He turned back to the counter and finished placing his order while Olivia stood to the side, her heart pounding. She had done it. She had found work, at least for the summer. Everything else she would figure out as she went. 40 minutes later, she was sitting on the bench seat of a sturdy wagon, her bag stowed in the back along with supplies, as Garrett Morrison guided 2 horses westward out of Mojave. The morning was already growing hot, the sun a white disk in the pale sky. They rode in silence for the first mile, and Olivia used the time to observe her new employer. He sat easily on the wagon seat, his hands competent on the reins, his eyes scanning the landscape with the automatic awareness of someone who knew this land intimately. Up close, she could see the deep lines around his eyes and mouth, the way his shoulders carried tension like a physical weight. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, she said finally. He glanced at her, then back at the road. You might not thank me once you see the state of the house. I have been living like a bachelor and it shows. I am sure it is not as bad as you think. He actually laughed at that, a short, humorless sound. You will see. Another silence fell, but it was less awkward now. Olivia watched the landscape roll past, fascinated despite herself. She had never been this far into the desert before. The emptiness was both frightening and beautiful, all that space stretching out under an enormous sky. What made you leave San Francisco? Garrett asked suddenly. Olivia hesitated, then decided honesty was best. My father died and left debts I could not pay. I lost the boarding house. I have an aunt in Sacramento who might help me find a teaching position, but I needed to earn some money first, get back on my feet. He nodded slowly. I am sorry about your father. Thank you. And you are sure you want to spend the summer out here. It is isolated. Lonely, some might say. Loneliness does not frighten me, Mr. Morrison. Poverty does. He looked at her again, and this time she saw something like respect in his eyes. Call me Garrett, we are not formal out here. Then you should call me Olivia. Olivia, he repeated as though testing the name. All right. The ranch came into view as they crested a low rise. It was larger than Olivia had expected, a collection of buildings nestled in a broad valley with the mountains rising behind them. She could see the main house, a long, low structure with a covered porch, the barn and several outbuildings, corrals with horses, and in the distance cattle grazing on the sparse grass. A creek ran through the property, marked by a line of cottonwood trees. It is beautiful, she said, meaning it. Garrett looked at the ranch as though seeing it through her eyes. It is a good piece of land. My father started it 20 years ago, and I have been working to build it up. We run about 500 head of cattle plus horses. It is hard work, but it is mine. There was pride in his voice, and pain too. Olivia wondered how much harder it had become after his wife's death, when the dream they must have shared became his alone to carry. As they approached the main house, several men emerged from the barn, clearly curious about the newcomer. Garrett pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the porch and jumped down, then came around to help Olivia descend. His hand was calloused and warm, steadying her as she stepped down. "Listen up," he called to the men. "This is Olivia Lambert. She is going to be keeping house for us through the summer. I expect you all to treat her with respect. Anyone who does not can find work elsewhere." "Understood," the men nodded, some of them grinning. One of them, older than the others with a grizzled beard, tipped his hat. "Welcome, miss. Any chance you cook better than Garrett does?" "I imagine a rock could cook better than I do," Garrett said dryly, and the men laughed. Olivia felt some of her nervousness ease. "I will do my best." "That is saying something right there," the older man said. "I am Pete. That is Henry, Miguel, Jack, Tommy, and the young one is Sam. We work hard, eat a lot, and we will stay out of your way." "Thank you," Olivia said, smiling at them. They seemed like decent men, rough around the edges but not threatening. Garrett grabbed her carpet bag from the wagon. "Come on. I will show you the house." He had not been exaggerating about the state of things. The main house was solidly built but clearly neglected. The front room held basic furniture covered in dust, papers stacked on every surface, dirty dishes on the table. The kitchen was worse, with pots that had not been properly cleaned, a stove that needed scrubbing, and what appeared to be several weeks' worth of grime on the floor. "Your room is back here," Garrett said, leading her down a short hallway. He opened a door to reveal a small but decent room with a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. At least this room was relatively clean, though dusty from disuse. "It was supposed to be the nursery," he said quietly, and Olivia heard the grief in his voice. "We never got to use it." "I am sorry," she said, meaning it deeply. He set down her bag and turned to face her. "Look, I know this is more than you bargained for. If you want to go back to town, I will understand. I can pay you for the day and drive you back." Olivia looked at him, at the exhaustion and pain he carried, at the house that had been a home and had become just a place to sleep. She thought about her own losses, her own grief, and recognized a kindred spirit. "I am not going anywhere," she said firmly. "This is exactly what I needed. A place where I can work hard enough to forget things for a while. You have given me that, Garrett. The least I can do is give you a clean house and decent meals in return." Something in his face softened. "All right then. I will let you get settled. Lunch is usually around noon if you can manage something. Otherwise, we can wait until supper." "I will manage lunch," Olivia assured him. "It might be simple, but it will be hot and edible." "That is more than we have had in a while." He paused at the door. "Thank you, Olivia, for staying." After he left, Olivia stood in the small room and took a deep breath. Then she changed into her oldest dress, tied an apron around her waist, and went to assess the kitchen properly. She had about 3 hours until noon, and she intended to make the most of them. She started by heating water on the stove, then began washing every dish and pot she could find. While the water heated for the next batch, she cleared the table, swept the floor, and took inventory of what food was available. There was flour, cornmeal, beans, salt pork, canned tomatoes, coffee, and not much else. She could work with that. By the time noon approached, she had made a large pot of beans with salt pork and tomatoes, cornbread in the oven, and strong coffee. It was simple fare, but it was hot and substantial. She stepped out onto the porch and rang the bell she had found hanging there. The men came from various directions, looking surprised and pleased to smell actual cooking. They washed up at the pump outside and filed into the dining room, where Olivia had set the table properly with the clean dishes. Garrett was the last to enter, and she saw his surprise at the transformation of the room. It was far from perfect, but it was clean, and the smell of food filled the air. "Sit down, everyone," Olivia said, bringing the pot of beans to the table. "It is not fancy, but there is plenty." The men did not need to be told twice. They ate with the appetite of men who did hard physical work, and Olivia was gratified to see them take second and third helpings. Even Garrett ate more than she suspected he usually did, though he was quieter than the others. "Miss Lambert, this is the best meal we have had in months," Pete said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "If you cook like this all summer, we will be spoiled rotten." "Just wait until I have time to really provision the kitchen," Olivia said. This was thrown together with what was on hand. "If this is thrown together, I cannot wait to see what you do with a full pantry," Miguel said, grinning. After the meal, the men headed back to work, all of them thanking her warmly. Garrett lingered, helping her carry dishes to the kitchen. "You did not have to do that," he said, nodding at the clean room, the organized shelves. "Yes, I did," Olivia said simply. "This is my job now." He looked at her for a long moment. "I am glad you stayed." Over the next 2 weeks, Olivia threw herself into the work with a determination that surprised even herself. She woke before dawn to start breakfast, making eggs, bacon, biscuits, and coffee for 7 hungry men. After they headed out to work, she tackled the house room by room, scrubbing years of neglect away. She washed windows, beat rugs, polished furniture, and laundered mountains of clothes and linens. In the afternoons, she prepared substantial suppers, teaching herself to cook on the wood stove, experimenting with the limited ingredients available. She made stews and roasts, biscuits and cornbread, pies from dried fruit. She kept detailed lists of what was needed and gave them to Garrett before his weekly trips to town. The work was exhausting, but it was also deeply satisfying. She fell into bed each night too tired to think about her losses, too tired to worry about the future. And slowly, the house began to transform into a home again. The men were respectful and grateful, going out of their way to make things easier for her. Pete chopped extra firewood and kept it stacked by the kitchen door. Miguel repaired the pump so the handle did not stick. Tommy fixed the window in her room that had been painted shut. They all praised her cooking extravagantly, and she found herself looking forward to mealtimes, to the conversation and laughter that filled the dining room. But it was Garrett who occupied more and more of her thoughts. She noticed small things about him as the days passed. The way he always let his men eat first before serving himself. How he checked on the horses every night before going to bed, talking to them softly. The careful way he mended his own tack, his movements precise and patient. He was not a talkative man, but when he did speak, his words were thoughtful and kind. He thanked her every day for her work, noticed when she had made improvements to the house, and one Saturday brought her back a small bag of horehound candies from town, saying he had noticed she liked sweets. Olivia told herself it was simply gratitude she felt, appreciation for a fair employer. But she could not quite ignore the way her heart beat faster when she heard his step on the porch, or the pleasure she took in seeing him eat meals she had prepared. One evening in early June, after the dishes were washed and put away, Olivia stepped out onto the porch to enjoy the cooler air. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple. She heard footsteps and turned to see Garrett approaching from the direction of the barn. "Beautiful evening," he said, climbing the steps to stand beside her. "It is," she agreed. "I never get tired of watching the sunset here." Better than San Francisco, she considered the question. Different. San Francisco has the ocean, the fog, the noise and crowds. This has silence and space. "I think I needed the space," He nodded, leaning against the porch rail. I felt the same when I came here. I grew up in Kansas, and after my father died, I wanted something different, something that was mine. You have built something remarkable, Olivia said. The ranch runs smoothly, the men respect you, and you are making a good life here. With your help these past weeks, he said. I did not realize how much I had let things slide until you started fixing them. The house feels like a home again. There was something in his voice that made her look at him more closely. In the fading light, his face was softer, more open than she had seen it. Thank you for saying that, she said quietly. They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky. Olivia felt a contentment she had not experienced in a long time, a sense of being exactly where she needed to be. Olivia, Garrett said suddenly, and something in his tone made her turn to face him fully. I want to apologize. For what? For hiring you thinking it was temporary, for planning to let you go at the end of summer. Her heart skipped a beat. You have changed your mind. He met her eyes directly. I am not sure I should. It would complicate things. But the truth is, I do not want you to leave. This place needs you. The men need you. I need you. Olivia felt heat rise in her cheeks, felt something flutter in her chest that was more than simple pleasure. I signed on for the summer, Garrett. I made a commitment. I know. And I will hold to our agreement. I just wanted you to know that if you change your mind about Sacramento, if you decide you might want to stay longer, there will be a place for you here. She could not speak for a moment, emotion thick in her throat. When she did find her voice, it was barely above a whisper. I will think about it. He nodded, seeming to understand that was all she could promise right now. That is all I ask. Good night, Olivia. Good night, Garrett. She watched him walk away toward the foreman's quarters where he slept, and she pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart racing. Something had shifted between them in that conversation, something subtle but profound. She was not sure what to do with the feelings rising inside her, but she could not deny them either. As June progressed into July, Olivia found herself watching Garrett more openly, noticing more details about him. The way he was always the first one up in the morning and the last one to quit at night. How he knew every animal on the ranch by sight and could tell when something was wrong just by watching them move. The gentleness in his hands when he examined an injured horse, the patience he showed teaching young Sam how to properly throw a rope. She saw the man he had been before grief had settled on him like a shadow, and she wanted to know that man better. She started lingering over the coffee pot after breakfast, timing her presence so she might catch a few minutes of conversation with him before he headed out. She made his favorite meals, noticed what he liked, and made sure there was always plenty. She mended his shirts with extra care, taking satisfaction in the neat, small stitches that would hold strong. And Garrett, for his part, seemed to be noticing her too. He started finding small ways to help her, hauling water for the laundry, bringing her wildflowers from the range in a battered tin cup, repairing things around the house before she even asked. He talked more at meals, sharing stories about the ranch, his dreams for expanding the herd, funny incidents from roundups past. His laughter came more easily, and the deep lines of weariness on his face began to soften. The other men noticed. Pete started making himself scarce after supper, herding the younger hands back to the bunkhouse, despite their protests that they wanted more coffee. Miguel winked at Olivia when Garrett brought in those wildflowers. Even taciturn Henry smiled more when he saw the two of them working together to bring in supplies from the wagon. On the 4th of July, Mojave held a celebration in town, and Garrett asked Olivia if she wanted to go. She said yes immediately, and the pleasure in his face made her own heart lift. She wore her best dress, the dark blue with the white lace collar, and took extra care with her hair, pinning it up in a style she had not bothered with since leaving San Francisco. When she emerged from her room, Garrett was waiting by the wagon, and the look on his face when he saw her made her breath catch. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you," she managed. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He had shaved, trimmed his hair, and wore a clean shirt and vest. Without the coating of dust and weariness, he was a genuinely handsome man, and Olivia felt a flutter of pride walking beside him. The celebration was modest but enthusiastic, with patriotic speeches, a band playing popular tunes, and tables laden with food. Garrett introduced Olivia to people she had not met on her brief time in town, and she saw the speculative looks, the barely concealed curiosity. No doubt there would be talk about the pretty housekeeper and the widowed rancher. She found she did not care. They ate barbecue and apple pie, watched the races and contests, and when the band started playing waltzes as the sun set, Garrett asked her to dance. Olivia had not danced since before her father's death, and she had forgotten how much she enjoyed it. Garrett was a good dancer, confident and smooth, and being in his arms felt natural and right. They danced 3 dances before taking a break, both of them flushed and happy. "I did not want today to end," Garrett said as they stood at the edge of the crowded square, watching other couples dance. "Neither do I," Olivia admitted. He looked down at her, and in his eyes she saw something that made her pulse quicken. "Olivia, I need to be honest with you about something." "What is it? When I hired you, I thought I was just getting help around the house. I thought it would be simple, straightforward. You would work for the summer and leave, and things would go back to how they were." He paused, his jaw working as though the words were difficult to form. "But things are not simple, and I do not want them to go back to how they were." "Garrett," she said softly, her heart pounding, "I know it is too soon. I know I should not be saying this, but I am falling in love with you, Olivia. Maybe I have been since the day you stood in Martha's store and told me you were not afraid of hard work." He took a breath. "And I know you plan to go to Sacramento to start a teaching career, and I have no right to ask you to give that up. But I need you to know how I feel. I need you to know that if you stay, it would not just be as my housekeeper. It would be as my partner, my wife, if you would have me." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "You are proposing to me." "I am trying to," he said with a crooked smile. "Not doing a very good job of it, am I?" She laughed, a slightly watery sound. "I think you are doing fine. So what do you say? I know it is fast. We have only known each other 6 weeks, but out here, people do not have the luxury of long courtships. Life is short and hard, and when you find something good, you hold on to it." He took her hand, his calluses rough against her palm. "You are something good, Olivia. The best thing that has happened to me in a long time." She looked at their joined hands, at his earnest face, and felt the truth settle into her bones. She had been telling herself she was just grateful for the work, for a place to stay, but it was more than that. It had been more than that for weeks. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I tried not to. I tried to remember this was just temporary, just a job until I moved on, but I stopped thinking about Sacramento. I started thinking about staying. I started thinking about a life here with you." The joy that lit his face was almost painful to witness. "Is that a yes?" "It is a yes," she said, and then his arms were around her, pulling her close, and she was laughing and crying at the same time. He kissed her then, right there at the edge of the dance, and she did not care who saw. His lips were warm and gentle, and the kiss tasted like promises and new beginnings. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I will spend every day making sure you do not regret this." "I know," she said, "and I will do the same." They drove back to the ranch that night as an engaged couple, and Olivia felt as though she were floating. The future she had been dreading, the uncertainty that had haunted her since her father's death, suddenly looked bright and full of possibility. When they arrived home, they found Pete and the other hands waiting up, and by their knowing grins, Olivia suspected they had been placing bets on this very outcome. "So," Pete said, trying and failing to look innocent. "Good celebration." "The best," Garrett said, his arm around Olivia's waist. "We have some news. Olivia has agreed to marry me." The eruption of cheers and congratulations filled the night air. The men slapped Garrett on the back and tipped their hats to Olivia, all of them genuinely happy. Sam, the youngest at 19, actually whooped with delight. "About damn time," Pete said, grinning widely. "We were wondering how long it would take you two to figure it out." "Was it that obvious?" Olivia asked, feeling her cheeks heat. "Only to anyone with eyes," Miguel said kindly. "You are good for him, Miss Lambert, good for all of us." "It is going to be Mrs. Morrison soon," Garrett corrected, and the pride in his voice made Olivia's heart swell. They decided to marry quickly, seeing no point in a long engagement. The following Saturday, they stood before the circuit preacher in Mojave's small church, with Martha and her husband as witnesses, and the ranch hands filling the pews. Olivia wore a simple cream-colored dress that Martha had helped her alter, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Sam had picked that morning. The ceremony was short but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Garrett kissed her with such tenderness that Olivia felt tears slip down her cheeks. They held a celebration at the ranch that evening, with a meal that Olivia and Martha had prepared together, and music from a fiddle player Miguel knew. They danced in the yard under the stars, and Olivia thought she had never been happier in her entire life. That night, for the first time, she moved into Garrett's room in the foreman's quarters that he had been using since his wife's death. He had cleaned it thoroughly, put fresh linens on the bed, and brought in her few belongings. "Are you nervous?" he asked as they stood together in the lamplight. "A little," she admitted, "but not afraid." "I will be gentle," he promised. "We have all the time in the world." And he was gentle, patient, and tender as they learned each other's bodies as they came together as husband and wife. Olivia had heard enough whispered conversations among the boarders in San Francisco to have a basic understanding of what happened between married couples. But the reality was both more awkward and more wonderful than she had imagined. There was fumbling and laughter along with passion, and by the time they finally fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, Olivia felt completely at peace. The summer stretched long and golden, each day bleeding into the next in a haze of contentment. Olivia continued to keep house, but now it was her house, her home, and the difference showed in every detail. She planted a vegetable garden near the kitchen, coaxing tomatoes and squash and beans from the desert soil. She made curtains for the windows, pieced together from fabric Martha helped her order from a catalog. She filled the house with small touches that made it comfortable and welcoming. Garrett was an attentive husband, always finding small ways to show his love. He brought her things from his trips to town, silly little gifts like ribbon for her hair or a book he thought she might enjoy. He helped with the dishes after supper, ignoring the teasing from his men. He held her every night and woke her every morning with a kiss. They talked about everything during those long summer evenings on the porch. He told her about his childhood in Kansas, about his parents and his dreams. She told him about running the boarding house, about the characters who had stayed there, about her father's slow decline into gambling and debt. They shared their grief over the people they had lost and found comfort in understanding each other's pain. "I did not think I would ever feel this way again," Garrett confessed one night as they lay in bed, her head on his chest. "After Rebecca died, I thought that part of my life was over, that I would just work the ranch and grow old alone." "What changed?" Olivia asked, tracing patterns on his skin with her finger. "You arrived." He caught her hand and brought it to his lips. "You brought life back into this house, into me. I do not think I really understood how much I had shut down until you started opening things back up." "I am glad I stayed," Olivia said. "Sacramento feels like someone else's dream now. Do you have any regrets about giving up teaching?" She considered the question honestly. "No. I think I would have been a decent teacher, but I do not think I would have been happy. This is where I belong." As August arrived, bringing with it slightly cooler temperatures and the promise of fall, Olivia began to suspect she might be pregnant. Her monthly courses, always reliable, were late, and she felt a persistent queasiness in the mornings. She waited another week to be sure before saying anything to Garrett, but finally one evening she could not keep the secret any longer. "I think I am carrying our child," she said simply as they cleaned up after supper. Garrett froze, the dish in his hand dripping soapy water onto the floor. "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor. I am late, and I have been feeling ill in the mornings." He set down the dish carefully, then pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. When he pulled back, she saw tears on his cheeks. "I did not think I would get another chance at this," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "After Rebecca and the baby died, I thought God was telling me I was not meant to be a father." "You are going to be a wonderful father," Olivia said firmly. "I have seen you with the animals with Sam. You are patient and kind and good." When is the baby due?" she calculated quickly. "April, I think. Maybe early May," he laughed, a sound of pure joy. "A spring baby. That is good luck on a ranch." They told the men at dinner the next day and once again found themselves surrounded by congratulations and well wishes. Pete declared himself the unofficial uncle and promised to teach the child to rope as soon as it could walk. Miguel's wife, who Olivia had met a few times, sent over baby clothes her own children had outgrown. Garrett became even more protective, insisting she not lift anything heavy, that she rest more. Olivia tolerated his hovering because she understood the fear behind it, the memory of losing Rebecca and their child. But she also insisted on continuing to work, knowing that keeping busy was good for both her body and her mind. The pregnancy progressed normally through the fall and winter. Olivia's belly swelled, and she felt the baby move for the first time in late October, a flutter that made her gasp with wonder. Garrett spent an entire evening with his hand on her stomach, waiting to feel the kicks, his face full of awe when the baby finally obliged. As winter set in, Garrett made arrangements for a doctor from Barstow to come stay at the ranch near her due date. He was taking no chances this time, determined that Olivia and the baby would have every advantage. The doctor, an older man named Henry Walsh who had delivered hundreds of babies, arrived in mid-April and set up in one of the spare rooms. Olivia was both reassured and anxious at his presence, knowing what it meant about Garrett's fears. "He lost his first wife and baby," she explained to Dr. Walsh one afternoon. "He is terrified it will happen again." "Understandable," the doctor said kindly. "But you are young and healthy and the baby seems to be positioned well. I see no reason to expect complications." Labor started on a warm evening in late April, a backache that gradually intensified into unmistakable contractions. Garrett sent for Dr. Walsh immediately and then paced the front room like a caged animal while the doctor examined Olivia in the bedroom. "Everything looks good, Doctor," Walsh assured Garrett when he emerged. "It will be a while yet. First babies usually take their time." It was indeed a long labor, stretching through the night and into the next morning. Olivia gritted her teeth through the contractions, focusing on Martha's encouraging words. The older woman had come out from town to help and proved to be a steadying presence. Garrett stayed close, holding Olivia's hand when the doctor allowed it, whispering encouragement. She saw the fear in his eyes but also the love, and it gave her strength. Finally, after nearly 18 hours of labor, she felt the overwhelming urge to push. Dr. Walsh positioned himself at the end of the bed and coached her through it. 3 pushes later, she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby's first cry. "It is a boy, doctor," Walsh announced, holding up a squalling, red-faced infant. "A healthy boy with good lungs." Olivia fell back against the pillows, exhausted and exhilarated. The doctor cleaned the baby quickly and wrapped him in a soft blanket before placing him in her arms. He was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair like his father's, and eyes that squinted up at her with unfocused wonder. "Can Garrett come in?" she asked. "Of course," Dr. Walsh said, smiling. "I will get him." Garrett burst into the room moments later, his face pale and anxious. But when he saw Olivia sitting up in bed, holding their son, his expression transformed into something radiant. "A boy," Olivia said softly. "We have a son, Garrett." He approached the bed slowly, as though afraid to believe it was real. When he looked down at the baby, a tear rolled down his cheek. "He is beautiful. You are both beautiful." His voice broke on the last word. "Do you want to hold him?" Garrett nodded, unable to speak. Olivia placed the baby carefully in his arms, and she watched her strong, capable husband cradle their tiny son with infinite gentleness. "Hello, little one," Garrett whispered. "I am your papa, and I promise you, I am going to spend every day of my life making sure you know how loved you are." The baby made a small sound, his tiny fist escaping the blanket to wave in the air. Garrett caught the fist with his finger and the baby's hand closed around it reflexively. "He is strong," Garrett said, looking up at Olivia with wonder. "Just like his father," she said. They named him George, after Garrett's father, with the middle name of William after Olivia's. Little George proved to be a good baby, sleeping in reasonable stretches and nursing well. Olivia recovered quickly from the birth, and within 2 weeks she was back to managing the household, though with much more help from the men, who all took turns being unofficial uncles. Pete carved a beautiful wooden rattle for the baby. Miguel's wife brought over a handmade quilt. Even taciturn Henry was caught making silly faces at George when he thought no one was looking. Garrett was a devoted father, spending every free moment with his son. He would sit in the rocking chair Olivia had found in the attic and restored, holding George while Olivia worked in the kitchen, talking to the baby about the ranch, about the horses, about all the things they would do together when George was older. "You are going to learn to ride before you can walk," Garrett told his son one evening. "And I am going to teach you everything I know about raising cattle and managing land. But more than that, I am going to teach you to be a good man, the kind of man your mother deserves." Olivia, listening from the doorway, felt her heart overflow. This was what she had been searching for without knowing it when she stepped off that stagecoach in Mojave nearly a year ago. Not just work or security, but a home, a family, a love that made every day feel like a gift. As George grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Garrett expanded the herd, bought more land, and built a new barn. Olivia continued to manage the household, but now with the help of a young woman from town who came 3 days a week to assist with the heavier chores. This gave Olivia more time to spend with George, teaching him his letters and numbers, reading to him from the books Garrett bought on his trips to town. When George was 3, Olivia found herself pregnant again. This time, The pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Dr. Walsh came again for the birth, and on a cool October morning, Olivia delivered a healthy baby girl with blonde hair and green eyes. They named her Grace, and she proved to be as sweet-tempered as her name suggested. George was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help with her care, to hold her and sing to her. Watching her children together, Olivia felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. The years rolled on in a steady rhythm of seasons. George learned to ride at 4, sitting in front of his father on a gentle mare. Grace followed at the same age, fearless and laughing. They grew up surrounded by love and wide open spaces, by hard-working men who treated them with affection, by parents who showed them every day what a good marriage looked like. Olivia and Garrett's love deepened with each passing year. They had their disagreements, of course, moments of frustration or misunderstanding, but they had learned to talk through problems, to listen to each other, to remember what they had survived to find each other. One evening, when George was 10 and Grace was 7, Olivia stood on the porch watching the sunset, just as she had on her first day at the ranch. She felt arms come around her from behind and leaned back against Garrett's chest. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How lucky I am," she said. "How one decision, getting off that stagecoach in Mojave, changed my entire life." "I am the lucky one," Garrett said. "You came here looking for work until summer, and I was foolish enough to think I could let you go when summer ended." She turned in his arms to face him. "You made summer stretch to a lifetime." "I am still stretching it," he said, smiling. "Still trying to make every day count." "We have done well, haven't we?" Olivia said, looking out at the ranch at the life they had built together. "We have done better than well. We have built something real, something lasting. A home, a family, a legacy for our children. And we are not done yet," Olivia added. "There is still so much ahead of us." "Like what?" "Like watching our children grow up, helping them find their own paths. Like growing old together, sitting on this porch when our hair is gray and our grandchildren are running around the yard." Garrett kissed her softly. "I cannot wait for all of it." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, they stood together in comfortable silence. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen to build a life together on faith and hard work and love. Inside the house, they could hear George and Grace arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it was to set the table. From the bunkhouse, someone was playing a harmonica, the notes drifting across the yard. A horse whinnied in the corral, and in the distance, cattle lowed as they settled for the night. It was the sound of home, of belonging, of a life well lived. Olivia thought back to the frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach with $30 and a carpetbag, and she could hardly recognize herself in that person. She had been seeking temporary work, a way station on the road to somewhere else. Instead, she had found her destination. Years continued to pass in their steady rhythm. George grew into a tall, serious young man who shared his father's way with animals and his mother's careful planning. At 18, he took on more responsibility at the ranch, working alongside Garrett to manage the expanding operation. Grace, at 15, was bright and spirited, already talking about becoming a teacher like her mother had once dreamed of being. Olivia encouraged her daughter's ambitions even as part of her hoped Grace might choose to stay close to home. But she understood the pull of dreams, the need to forge one's own path. She would support whatever Grace decided, just as Garrett would support George whether he chose to stay on the ranch or seek his fortune elsewhere. One spring evening, as Olivia and Garrett celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary, they gathered their children and the ranch hands, many of whom had been with them from the beginning, for a special dinner. Pete, now gray-haired and slower but still sharp as ever, raised a toast. To Garrett and Olivia, who built this ranch into something special, who showed us that hard work and love can create miracles. Everyone drank to that, and Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. She looked around the table at the faces she knew so well, the people who had become family. "I want to say something," Garrett said, standing. He took Olivia's hand and pulled her to her feet beside him. 20 years ago, I hired a woman to work for the summer. I thought it would be simple. She would cook and clean for a few months and then leave for Sacramento. George and Grace exchanged knowing smiles, having heard this story before. But nothing about Olivia Lambert was simple, Garrett continued. She swept into this house like a storm and turned everything upside down. She cleaned and organized and cooked meals that made grown men weep with gratitude. Pete laughed and nodded vigorously. More than that, she brought this house back to life. She brought me back to life. I had given up on happiness, on love, on the idea that I deserved a family. And then this stubborn, beautiful, brilliant woman showed up and refused to let me hide anymore. Olivia felt tears streaming down her face now, not bothering to wipe them away. "She agreed to marry me after 6 weeks, Garrett said, his voice thick with emotion. "She gave me 20 years of joy, 2 incredible children, and a partnership that has made every challenge easier to bear. She made summer stretch to a lifetime, and I thank God for it every single day." He turned to face her fully. "I love you, Olivia Morrison. I loved you when you stood in Martha's store with your carpet bag and your determination. I loved you when you scrubbed my kitchen and made cornbread from nothing. I loved you when you said yes to marrying me, when you gave birth to our children, when you stood by me through droughts and hard winters and all the 1,000 challenges of ranching life. I love you now, and I will love you until my last breath." Olivia could not speak. She simply threw her arms around her husband and held him while their children whooped, and the ranch hands applauded and Pete dabbed at his eyes with a bandana. "I love you too," she finally managed to whisper in his ear. Then, now, always. The party continued late into the night, with music and dancing and laughter. Olivia danced with her husband, her son, even old Pete, who moved stiffly but gamely across the floor. She looked at the life she had built, the family she had created, and felt nothing but gratitude. Later, as she and Garrett prepared for bed, he pulled out a small wrapped box from the drawer of his nightstand. "I have something for you," he said. Olivia opened it carefully to find a delicate gold locket. She opened it to see tiny photographs inside, one of George and one of Grace. "Garrett, it is beautiful. I wanted you to carry them with you always," he said softly, "to remember what we built together." She fastened it around her neck and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was older than the girl who had arrived in Mojave, with lines around her eyes and threads of gray in her dark hair. But she was also happier, more content, more fully herself. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Not having more time to court, to be sure." "Never," Garrett said firmly. "We had exactly the time we needed. I knew after 2 weeks that I wanted you to stay forever. The only question was whether I had the courage to tell you. I am glad you found the courage." "Me too." As they lay in bed that night, Olivia thought about the journey that had brought her here. The loss of her father and her home in San Francisco had felt like the end of her world, but it had actually been the beginning of something far better than she could have imagined. She had come to Mojave seeking work until summer. Instead, she had found a husband, a family, a purpose, and a love that would last her lifetime. Garrett had been right when he said summer stretched to forever. Every day with him felt like the golden warmth of a perfect summer afternoon, full of light and possibility. Years continued to flow past like water. George married a girl from town, a practical young woman named Sarah who fit seamlessly into ranch life. They built a house on the far side of the property and started their own family, giving Olivia and Garrett 3 grandchildren in quick succession. Grace did become a teacher, taking a position in Mojave and boarding with Martha Hayes, now a widow. She married at 25, a banker from Barstow, and they split their time between town and the ranch. Olivia and Garrett grew older together, their hair graying, their movements slowing. But their love never dimmed. They still sat together on the porch every evening, watching the sunset over the mountains. They still held hands when they walked. They still made each other laugh with inside jokes accumulated over decades. Pete eventually retired, moving into a small cottage on the ranch property where he could watch the operation he had helped build. New hands came and went, but the core of the operation remained solid, a testament to Garrett's management and Olivia's steady support. One evening, when Olivia was 60 and Garrett was 67, they sat on that familiar porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. The ranch was thriving under George's management, though Garrett still offered advice and helped when he could. Grace was visiting with her family, filling the house with noise and laughter. "Did you ever imagine this?" Olivia asked, gesturing to the scene before them. "When you hired that desperate woman from San Francisco," Garrett smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "I did not dare to imagine it. I was too afraid of hope back then. But you taught me to hope again, to believe that good things were possible." "You did the same for me," Olivia said. "I thought I had lost everything. I had no idea I was actually on my way to finding everything." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that only comes from decades of companionship. "I would do it all again," Garrett said suddenly. "Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of uncertainty, all of it exactly the same, just to end up here with you." Olivia felt tears well up, as they still did when he said things like that. "So would I." Their youngest grandchild, a boy of 3, came running up to the porch, his face flushed with excitement. "Grandpa, Grandpa, come see what I found." Garrett stood with a slight grimace, his joints protesting, but his smile was wide. "Show me, little man." Olivia watched her husband walk off with their grandson, his gait slower than it once was, but his engagement with the child total and joyful. This was what she had given him, she realized. Not just a clean house and good meals, though those had been important. She had given him back his capacity for joy, for engagement with life, for love. And he had given her a home, a purpose, a family, and a love story that had exceeded her wildest dreams. That night, as they prepared for bed, Garrett took her in his arms and held her close. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what? For getting off that stagecoach, for staying, for loving me, for giving me a lifetime of summers." Olivia pulled back to look at him. "You know, when Martha told me about a rancher who needed help, I almost did not go. I almost decided to wait in town and see if something else came up." "What made you go?" "Desperation, partly," she admitted, "but also something else. A feeling, maybe. A sense that something important was waiting for me out here." "Fate," Garrett said. "Maybe. Or maybe just luck. Either way, I am grateful every day." They climbed into bed, and Garrett pulled Olivia against his chest, their bodies fitting together with the ease of long practice. "I love you," he said, as he did every night. "I love you," she replied, as she did every night. Outside, the desert night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. Somewhere a coyote howled, and one of the horses answered with a soft nicker. The sounds of the ranch, of home, of a life well lived. Olivia drifted off to sleep feeling utterly content, secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of the man who had made summer stretch to a lifetime, who had given her everything she never knew she needed. The morning sun would rise again tomorrow, as it always did, bringing with it another day of their life together. There would be meals to cook and work to do, grandchildren to spoil and problems to solve. There would be laughter and occasional tears, challenges and triumphs, the endless rhythm of ranch life rolling on. But underneath, it all would be what had always been there since that first summer. Love, partnership, and the quiet miracle of two people who found each other against all odds and built something lasting. As Olivia's breathing deepened into sleep, Garrett held her close and thought about the years behind them and the years still ahead. They had been blessed with time, with children and grandchildren, with prosperity and health. But the greatest blessing had been each other. Two broken people who had healed together, who had built a home and a family from nothing but determination and love. He had been so lost when she arrived, drowning in grief and isolation. And she had been equally lost, fleeing from failure and debt. But somehow they had found each other in that loss and built something neither could have created alone. That was the real miracle, he thought. Not the success of the ranch or the family they had raised, though those things were precious. The real miracle was the way two people could save each other, could create light from darkness, could make a lifetime from what was supposed to be just a summer. He pressed a kiss to the top of Olivia's head and closed his eyes, grateful beyond words for the woman who had walked into his life 20 years ago seeking work until summer, the woman who had become his partner, his love, his home. Outside, the ranch settled into the quiet rhythms of night. In the bunkhouse, tired men slept in their bunks, dreaming of horses and cattle and the endless work of the range. In the cottage, old Pete snored softly, his dreams full of memories of the ranch's early days. In the house across the property, George and Sarah lay entwined, planning for the future of the ranch they would one day fully inherit. And in the main house, in the bedroom where two people had first come together as husband and wife, Garrett and Olivia Morrison slept peacefully in each other's arms, their love a tangible presence in the room, warm as summer sunshine, enduring as the mountains that rose in the distance. The years would continue to pass. Their children would grow old, their grandchildren would have children of their own. The ranch would change hands, adapt to new times, face new challenges. But the story of how it all began, of the woman who came seeking work until summer, and the rancher who made summer stretch to a lifetime, would be told and retold, becoming part of the ranch's legend, part of the family's history. It was a love story, pure and simple. The kind that people dreamed about but rarely experienced. The kind that transformed lives and created legacies. The kind that proved that sometimes, when you least expect it, in the most unlikely of circumstances, you can find exactly what you have been searching for all along. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the desert night deepened around the sleeping ranch, that love continued to burn bright, a beacon in the darkness, a promise kept, a summer that had indeed stretched into forever.